All right, gamers. Wuthering Waves is finally out. Uh, at the time we're recording this, it is Friday, May 24th. So I believe the game has been out for about a day or so. And I just want to give my quick first impressions on the game. Uh, I do know some other YouTubers have done this, but who knows? Maybe I'll have something unique to say, I guess. Um, I'm trying to make this quick though. Uh, and I guess like a good starting point would be like the story. Moving on. Yeah, okay. Jokes aside, like I don't know the story. I don't pay attention to stories much. That's not really my thing. Um, I heard that it's okay. Uh, yeah, that's all I have to add to that. Um, but other than that, let's start with the positives. All right, I do have a decent amount of positives that I have so far regarding the game. The first one and the big one for me personally is the combat. The combat in this game feels very, very good. And I'm going to be comparing this to Genshin as it's very similar to that game. I'm not very similar to that game, but that's a game that I'm very familiar with in this type of like Breath of the Wild-esque space. And the combat in this game, I would argue, is better overall, depending on what you're looking for. It is very not difficult, I would say, but it does have a higher learning curve than it does in Genshin. Period. Not only do you have the ability to dodge attacks, but whenever you dodge attacks, it works similar to like Honkai Impact, for example, where when you dodge them, you can do kind of like a counter attack for some nice damage. Or depending on the different attacks, you might see this little like yellow circle, and if you time your attacks perfectly, you can parry the attack and you can damage the enemy's shield. I won't go into detail about that, but take my word on that. And but anyway, the parry thing feels nice. The dodge feels very good, and I like the ability, or I see the ability or the potential in the future where the combat could make the game a little bit more challenging in the future. And in my opinion, that makes getting over these obstacles more rewarding. Because there's a bit of a struggle there. It's not the hardest thing in the world once you get used to it, but it does add a little bit of spice to it, to like the combat, and when you're playing the game. The next positive, you don't use stamina when running outside of combat. Uh, listen, I'm not a big traversal guy. All right, I do it because I need the gems, like primo gems, for example, in Genshin. But holy shit, do they make it like a pain in the ass if you don't have any like characters to make it faster, like Seiyu or Yalan, for example. Um, and the reason being is that you have to use stamina when you're running, you have to use stamina when you're jumping, when you're dodging, when you're climbing, and all four of those make exploring that game completely a pain in the ass. I know there's some people that feel as though that having stamina, I guess like really makes you slow down and appreciate the environment. Don't listen to them. They're wrong. If you want to explore the environment, you will do that at your own pace. But this does give you the option to at least run through everything if you want to. And just having no stamina consumption outside of combat when you're running is great. Now you still consume stamina when you're dodging, and you still consume stamina when you're climbing, but it does help speed that up a lot when you have a full bar of stamina when you're doing set actions. The next positive is double jump, or kind of like an air dash, I guess you can argue. It's very quick, very simple. You jump, and then you dodge in the air, and it kind of works like a pseudo double jump. Makes traversal feel a bit better. That's all I have to add to it. The next positive I had is a skip button and dialogue. Now listen, as Genshin players, we know some of these characters like to yap. Uh, and in Genshin, you have to listen to them yap the whole time. And sometimes the timing at which you click through the dialogue changes drastically. So sometimes like you may be able to just click through it rapidly, and the other times you have to listen to them give a whole narrative about some shit you probably don't care about. In this game, for like the unimportant dialogues, for the most part, you can skip them, like the whole section in general. And it does, personally for me, that's a big thing because it just speeds up the gameplay. So I could just like when I'm doing unimportant missions, I just skip through it and just do what I gotta do. And if anybody like feels as though that this ruins the narrative or they feel as though it ruins the game because players don't pay attention to the story, shut up. You don't have to use the feature. So yeah. Next positive, I guess kind of like the soundtrack. To be honest with you, I didn't really think about this when I put this down, but I feel as though like the soundtrack sounds nice. I know when I was in the main city, like there was something I was hearing in the background that kind of reminded me of lo-fi, and I was like, oh, I should put that down. But realistically speaking, I don't really think about the soundtrack and the gameplay, which is neither here or there, I guess. Moving on from that, this one's a big one for me. The premium like shop from the currency you get from summoning, it's very, 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 very good. I try to make this as simple as I can make it. So within like the premium shop, you get like the rainbow currencies from pulling like 4 stars and 5 stars. It allows you to pick up 2 copies of any 5-star that's currently in the game. Well, yeah. So for the standard banners, it seems though they're not on a time limit, and you can just pick them up at any point. I believe it costs like 270 of the rainbow currency each. So it's very pricey, very hefty, but I would probably say just save them until you get a character you really like later on down the line, and just spend it on that. One thing I am interested to see is how this would be handled with the limited characters, because if you go to the shop right now, you would see that the limited characters in the shop, but they have a time limit. So I'm going to assume that at the end of this time limit, like you will no longer be able to pick those extra copies up in the shop, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just like, I don't know how they're going to handle that in the future, because now this begs the question. One of 2 things are going to happen with this. Either you pick up 2 copies now, and then when you reruns in the future, you could pick up 2 copies again, or those 2 copies are like a permanent thing on your account. And if you don't pick them up now, you can pick them up later, but those are the only 2 copies you get for free in the future. Obviously, I can't test this theory because 1, I'm broke as fuck, so I can't afford it. And 2, the game just came out, so they're not going to rerun characters for, I would say, probably the next 6 months at least. So we'll have to leave that to the whales to figure that out. The next positive I have written here is the dancing turtle. That's all I have to say about that. All right, and the next positive I have is the echoes, the echo system. It's very interesting. I would say it's very similar to how gear sets work in other gacha games, where you could farm the little gear set. You got your little main stat that you can farm for, and you got your little substats you can farm for depending on the characters. And I kind of like how the system works in here, where I believe I'm like level 19. So I've reached the point now where I can use like the little stamina in the game to farm like a bunch of like one specific set or 2 specific sets. I didn't look too much into detail with that. Or you can go around killing enemies and you can farm sets that way. Now, I feel as though when you farm sets the second way, like you're gonna have to have a little bit of knowledge about what you need and go hunt the enemy down, and then it has a chance of dropping. And I personally think that's cool because it gives us something to do when we run out of things to do. Like for example, in like Genshin, for example, right? If you do all the story quests and you do all the exploration, there's nothing left to do in the game, really, outside of like your dailies. At least with the way the ecosystems work here, is that even though it might be slower, it costs no stamina, and it is at least interesting because I've heard that there's like shiny versions of echoes in this game. So that's another incentive just to go around and just do random things. And which is very cool. I guess another pro I would have that I forgot to write down is the bosses. I love the way bosses work in this game, but I also have a hate relationship with them that I'll explain a bit later in the negative section, because there are some negatives. But the bosses are very fun, they're very challenging, and on top of that, they do have echoes you can pick up. So there's an extra incentive to farm that on top of that, or farm them on top of that. Also on top of that as well, like they do have a respawn, but the respawn I believe is like a minute. And you don't have to go to fucking Timbuktu and come back like and get you. You just like literally, I shit you not, I wasn't recording this. I was playing yesterday, and then I stopped to check something out in the inventory because I was testing out a new character, and I came back and the boss was just beating me again. And I was like, well, okay, that's fun. But I like the fact that it does that. But that's pretty much all the positives I have for the game for now. Some of these might change in the future depending on how I feel. Like, because we are still in the honeymoon phase of the game. So we'll see how things are in the future. Now down to the negatives. I don't really have much, but there are some, in my opinion, some big ones for me personally. And I would probably say for, depending on what type of player you are, it might be a big thing. The biggest thing for me are the dailies. Now, I don't mean the daily task, as those work similar to like Star Rail, for example, where it's not going to take you long to do them. uh, once you figure out what you need to do. Using the stamina, on the other hand, is going to be a big one. Um, it works very, very similar to Genshin, minus the condensed resin. And if you do like the stamina in Genshin, you would know that it does take a little bit to do. And it sucks because like if you're working a job or if you're going to school or you're just busy that day or like your life is just usually busy, like it's going to be difficult for you to get get these necessary resources to progress in the game further. Um the same fix I would apply to Genshin is the same fix I would apply here, is that instead of making it so we have to repeat doing things when we spend stamina, make it so that when we beat it once, we can just keep reclaiming it while we're there. Because like for me, it's like it makes no sense for us to beat it, use the stamina, and then do it again like 5 more times. I was like, okay, we already proven that we can beat it once. We might as well just be able to reclaim it as many times as we need once we beat it the first time. And this is especially true for bosses. Now, currently where I am, or at the time where I wrote this yesterday, like for me, it's like if I was doing this, let's say playing this game 20, 30 minutes a day, like it'd be very difficult for me to progress in like the story or maybe go explore, because if I have to do my dailies and get these boss drops so I can like ascend my characters, it's like I'm spending easily like 15 minutes doing that, because for one, like hardly any of us know what we're doing, right? Unless you've like looked at YouTubers that's like they'll play early access and stuff like that. Like hardly any of us know what we're doing, nor do we have the resources to necessarily get the proper echoes to make our characters do good damage. So killing these bosses is going to take quite a little while for us, like for like players who know what they're doing, like in this type of game in general. Now, if you get somebody who's never played this gacha game or any gacha game in the first place, 9 times out of 10, they're most likely going to struggle with the combat at first. Then on top of that, they're not going to know how the ecosystem works. They won't know what type of stats they need to add to their characters, and they don't even know what characters are going to be good, even though right now that doesn't even matter, right? But it will later on. They're really going to struggle with this, and I do believe it's kind of a hindrance, because now it's going to be less incentivized to keep playing the game later on, because it's just a pain in the ass to do a lot of shit. So there's one big negative for me personally. The next negative is obviously the performance of the game. Me personally, what I have here is that I've had weird like FPS drops in the city, and I had stuttering issues that like during the tutorial mission, like at the start. But outside of that, like my performance has been good. But I have been seeing a lot of like people, mostly mobile players, say that the game is really buggy, and that is a big thing. Now, granted, like the devs have been killing it with, being given feedback to the player base, providing rewards or at least compensation for these issues, and they've been very rapid with their response, like telling us what's going to happen, what they're planning to fix and stuff like that. So while we do have these issues, this negative kind of comes with an asterisk, because it's like they have been doing good with making sure that they want us to know that they're working on these issues and they're aware of these issues. Which, shout out to these devs, Hoyo can never. And another negative. So earlier, I did mention that there's a skip button for certain dialogues in the game, mostly unimportant ones. Yeah, there's a negative related to that. So in certain dialogues, namely the I don't even know his fucking name. It's the 5-star fucking wolf boy character with the damn fucking lion mask or whatever. I did his quest yesterday, and holy shit, the amount of yapping that's in that fucking quest is ridiculous. And this is a personal thing, because I don't care for him, so I don't care about his story, and I had to sit there through maybe like 10 minutes of fucking dialogue that I couldn't skip. And on top of that, I wasn't able to click through it because of the way it worked. I don't even know how to explain that. So do be warned about that. You got to put a little asterisk here too, to be honest, because I believe in one of the tweets the devs put out, they did mention that they're going to work on adding the skip dialogue option and more dialogue, I guess. And this potentially could be one of those things, but you never know. This other negative is a bit interesting. I briefly touched on this as well. Uh, I feel as though this game is very complex. Like, this one is not really a negative, but it is a concern. So, for me, it's like I've already played a game similar, so a lot of the knowledge I use in Genshin, I can bring over here. But if I'm like getting into this type of genre at the start, like the lot of information that I have to like consume is overwhelming, in my opinion. Especially when you look at like the character screen, for example, like outside of like knowing how the stats work and how the echoes work, like reading some of these characters kits are like ridiculous. Um, so for example, I pulled what's the monk lady name? I forgot her name. If I remember, I'll put it up. I'll put up a picture. I pulled her, and she's very simple to understand, like when you play her. But trying to understand how she works through her, like reading her kit, is like needlessly complicated. It's like a fucking novel when you like click on her, like her. I don't even know what the hell it's called. Like the little bar that fills up for you to get her shield. It's fucking long as shit, right? For no reason. And then on top of that, it's like trying to understand how that little bar works for every character can be confusing as well because there's so much like dialogue and text. I'm not dialogue, but there's so much text involved. It's like I don't even know personally. I don't even know where to focus on to understand. Like, okay, so this is how I built the meter. This is how the meter works. So I can kind of assume how this character works. I guess another example is like the fedora nice guy hat or nice guy dude, fucking who wears the blue vest and shit. He's a very simple character. Literally, like his E places this like pole down that continuously deals electrical damage, like to enemies in the radius. I think his ult just does damage. And when you use the heavy attack on when the meter is full, like you get like a bunch of bonuses like to the way his normal attack work, his heavy attack work. I believe his slam attack as well. And that's kind of simple to understand. But reading that like really confused me personally because I had no idea what any of his shit meant. So it does suck because I feel as though a lot of players would be turned off from that, especially like comparing it to Genshin, for example. But like a lot of the systems in that game is simple, and I think that could be a positive, you know, if you're a really casual player, because like a lot of these characters are kind of like simple to understand unless you're like trying to build specific teams and stuff like that. But you know, you're probably going to gradually get to that point as you progress and as you want to get better. But in this game, it's a lot. But at that point, it's like you would just recommend players to just find content creators who are knowledgeable about this game and watch them on that. The only thing is like I'm not sure how other content creators would explain it, like how these systems work. But you know, there's always somebody who could explain shit better than somebody else, depending on what you're looking for. But with all that being said, that's like the only negatives I have about the game. Comparing it to like Genshin, for example, like it is just different. I know there's going to be this big narrative where like people will feel as though you shouldn't compare this to Genshin, or it's not better than Genshin, or it is better than Genshin, or whatever. And realistically speaking, like these are two different games. You know, I think in a lot of aspects this game is better than Genshin, but somebody else just might be worse than Genshin. Like storytelling, for example, I've heard the story, like I said earlier, the story might be mediocre, and as of lately, story in Genshin has been doing really good. That might be one aspect that Genshin is better. Some people might prefer the simplicity in the combat in Genshin, and people like me might prefer like the bit of challenging combat that this game has. And I know there's like this whole thing where people were praying that this would be some quote unquote Genshin killer, but realistically speaking, there will never be a Genshin killer to like from outside sources. The only Genshin killer will be the Genshin devs, realistically speaking, you know, because they're very infamous for not only being stingy, they don't give a fuck about the feedback, and when they do care about the feedback, they provide like terrible compromises to like the issues people bring up, i.e., for example, the artifacts. People wanted like artifact loadouts where, you know, if you played that game, you would know that sometimes you have to take artifacts off of another character and put it on this character, and it could get convoluted and confused, like where the artifacts should be originally when you want to test out the characters. Well, they added a loadout system, except that you can't add repeat artifacts onto characters, which on paper makes sense, but in reality, it sucks because it's like if I wanted to farm unique artifact sets, I would just go do that and just give them artifacts in the first place. But that's not what people wanted. You know, some half-ass fix to it, and I don't believe they fixed it since. Or recently they upped the resin capacity by 40, and it's like, okay, what did that really do? You know, that it didn't. Like, people have been complaining about the resin system. Giving them an extra run in domains is not going to fix anything. Like, that's a slap in the face, you know. And like, on top of all of that, it's like they clearly don't give a fuck, you know. And the biggest example of that, God, it's gonna be funny if people were around for that. So during like the Leeway Chinese New Year event, the Genshin devs put out a live stream, and they were saying something along the lines of, you know, to thank all of our loyal player base who have been playing the game for 3 years, we would like to give you all 3 summons. Not 3 multis, not, I don't know, 30 standard banner wishes. It was just 3 summons. Limited summons, I guess, if you want that. And to me, that's low-key disrespectful, because it's like, why would you even celebrate us playing 3 years and then give us 3 measly summons? I can go farm that somewhere else, you know, especially during a big event like that. Like, Lantern Rite, that's what it's called. Lantern Rite Anniversary are the biggest events in Genshin. Like, that's a spit in the face. And at the time, you know, a lot of players were mad, but, you know, if you've been around, you know that the players went from being mad to now focusing on the content creator civil war that was happening. And then we all just took disrespect and moved on with that day. But I'm just hoping that, you know, Wuthering Waves, while not be the Genshin killer, will start lighting the fire under the Genshin devs' ass to start, you know, realizing that now they got real competition. You know, hopefully, you know, Wuthering Waves lasts long enough to do so. Especially since, like, they're obviously treating the player base well. Like, you know, to compensate for the PC performance, or not PC performance, but performance issues that's been happening. Today alone, they have given out, I believe, 20 standard banner issues as standard banner wishes as compensation. And then on top of that, I believe they're going to give out an additional 10 in the future, plus another 5-star selector, like, ticket thing or whatever. I don't know. I think that's how they explained it. So it's like, we already have one 5-star selector that you can get just from wishing. You have another smaller guaranteed standard banner 5-star banner. And on top of that, we have a 5-star weapon selector when you reach level 45. And then they're going to give out an additional 5-star character selector as compensation, plus wishes on top of that. That's ridiculous. I think that's, from these 2 days alone, they have given out more wishes as compensation than Genshin has in its 3.5-year run. And if these devs continue like that, like, I feel as though a lot of players would be more incentivized to keep playing the game and push through, you know, the needless complex things that you would have to learn, just because the devs actually care and they're being, you know, cooperative with the players. And I like, as much as I wouldn't say hate, kind of like slowly start to fade away from Genshin and start to play this more. Like, I just hope that the game that I once played a lot and that I have a lot of good memories with can finally start to improve and start to add changes that players have been begging for years, you know. But is that going to bring me back? Probably not. But it will help retain a lot of, you know, the Hoyo fans and Hoyo slaves that they have. Because that's the only, realistically speaking, like, that's the only people keeping that game alive, is the people who are, you know, diehard fans of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I don't think people should be shitting on each other, you know, depending on the game that they prefer or anything like that. But anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say regarding Wuthering Waves. I will be covering this, and I will be covering Snowbreak. I won't promise this, but I will try to upload 2 videos at once. Or not once, but once a week or twice a week. 2 videos a week, we'll say that. Right now, I am working on one for Enya. It's just a little side project that I'm working on. That's a Snowbreak video. And for Wuthering Waves, I kind of want to cover some characters and stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to the future of this game, and I really do hope that it succeeds way better than, like, Tower Fantasy, for example. And that game's not even fucking doing bad. It's doing pretty good, you know, so I'm not even worried about this. But anyway, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Um, if you do like the way a lot of my other videos work for like Snowbreak and stuff like that, like consider subscribing. Stick around, especially for like Wuthering raids and stuff like that. Otherwise, I appreciate you just checking it out. Hope that you all have a wonderful day, and yeah, I don't know.